Do you think you would survive a werewolf attack? How about if you were a werewolf being attacked? Now, if you want to learn more, then continue watching this video because I guarantee you're going to want to find out. Hey ghoulies, my name is Juan Carlos and I am also known as The Final Queer, and welcome to my YouTube channel. So the first series of my YouTube channel is called From Makeup to Mayhem. Now what it's all about is every month I will tell you which book we are going to read for that month. You'll have the entire month to read it, and the last Monday of the month I'm going to release a review of that book, and I'm also going to be doing my makeup that is inspired from the book as I'm talking about it. So we'll talk about lore, we'll talk about history, we'll do makeup, we'll do a review of the book. And finally, I'll also give you a couple of tips on how to be the final boy, the final girl, or the final queer at the end of the video. Now, if you're interested in makeup, horror, survival tips, then this is the channel for you. And make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications because you're definitely going to want to stick around for more of these videos and all of these amazing horror books that we're going to review. The very first book that we are going to actually review on this channel is Brian Assman's Good Dogs. Now, this is a book that was released in 2024, and I read it in one complete sitting, so I am very excited to just get started doing makeup with you all and talking about the book. So without further ado, we're going to start off with some werewolf history and werewolf lore. Alright folks, so now that we're going to start with the werewolf lore and the werewolf history, I've already done a little bit of my face. I've done my foundation, my highlighter, my eyebrows, just because your girl likes to take a long time, because makeup for me is very therapeutic. It's kind of like my me time. So I wanted to save some time by already doing my face and my brows. So without further ado, let's go ahead and continue into the process. I won't be saying every product that I am using, but I will put them in the description of this video. So if you're interested in whatever I'm using, please make sure to look at the description and you'll see everything that I use. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about this werewolf lore. So Brian Assman's Good Dogs is all about werewolves. So I thought, okay, where does werewolf history start? Um, a lot of the times we know where like the vampire stories start. We know where a lot of other creatures and cryptids where their stories start. So I was wondering, where do werewolves start? So I started to look into that history and started to look into what that was all about. And I found some pretty interesting things. So a lot of it kind of stems from the Middle Ages, where people thought that um, werewolves came from people that actually sold their souls to Satan. Um, and then Satan would in turn grant them a werewolf belt that actually gave them the ability to turn them into a werewolf. Um, which I thought was interesting because I was like, huh, I never had heard of that before. And I was like, wow, that's actually pretty interesting. But also, like, medieval people are interesting because it's like, how do you come up with that? Like, how does that story come to be? And so this resulted in werewolf witch hunts that were concurrent to the witch hunts of Europe. So, as many of you know, the witch hunts in Europe were the places where they actually did burn witches at the stake. That actually never happened here in the United States. We only had other punishments for witches, which, you know, that kind of sucked on both ends. But so werewolf witch hunts were people were being accused of being werewolves and murdering people in little villages, and it was wild, y'all. Like I can't even imagine. Like first of all, imagining accusing your neighbor of being a witch just because you don't like them, which oftentimes that was the case. But then accusing people of being werewolves, like that was. Mm. So the biggest case that actually came out of this was Peter Stump, who um, was known to be the most murderous werewolf of them all. And a lot of them believed that he had sold his soul to the devil, um, and had, regained this ability to change by using the belt that was given to him by the devil. Um, and so people had claimed that because he had admitted all of this, that he was the one that was actually, um, doing this. Because he actually had admitted, like, yes, I killed people and I turned into the werewolf and I did so because I was doing black magic from the age of 12. But, like, damn, doing black magic from the age of 12, that's kind of wild to me. Um, and so that's where a lot of people began to really kind of take into these um these frights of like being um caught after dark, and potentially being captured by a werewolf. um and so obviously they tried him and they found him guilty because he admitted it, and then he had said like, yeah, I dumped the werewolf belt in a valley somewhere, and that valley was searched and the belt was never found. um so he had admitted it, but no such belt had ever been found. But it became just kind of like folklore that one way to become a werewolf was through becoming, you know, um, through having that belt. Which, having a belt made of werewolf skin or made of wolf skin, um, I don't know. I don't know. A lot of other people stated that they accused people who were werewolf charmers. So, werewolf charmers were people that actually, like, kind of, you can consider them kind of like shamans in a way. They would create these little like potions or these little like knickknacks that would either protect you from wolves or actually cause a wolf attack. So these werewolf charmers were accused because like they're like you're associated with wolves, so you must be a werewolf. So you're a werewolf witch or wolf witch or whatever you want to call it. Um, and so what they would say is that there was this thing called werewolf Sagan, or I know how to speak German, so I can say it how it's supposed to say. Werewolf Sagan, which Werewolf Sagan is where you create a charm to kind of help you ward off wolves, right? Um, and so the Werewolf Sagan were like kind of good, but then there was also Werewolf Baden, which was the opposite, which that would cause werewolf attacks. So people started to claim that these wolf charmers were actually the ones creating these wolf attacks in villages, and it started to cause major panic all through the late Middle Ages. And you're just like, bruh, how do you all of this because people I understand that historically we as human beings we like to create things because we don't understand them, and that's why we have certain cryptids. That's why we have certain creatures and folk tales, but it's like, sometimes it's at the cost of people's lives, and it's not the best. Um, which this was that case where people then lost their lives because they were accused of being werewolves, and they were accused of being, you know, evil. Which then afterwards people were like, well, yeah, wait, no, these people were not evil. They were just regular people, and which sucks. Um, so after doing all that research, I started to then look at like, okay, what's kind of like the, because typically like when we think of werewolves, we think full moon, we think werewolf bite, and so that led me to think like, okay, like these werewolf witch hunts didn't really have like that, like that sense of like, okay, what is it, those characteristics of what how to become a werewolf. Like the first thing that you see is you have this werewolf skin that you put on yourself, and then you become you transform into a werewolf. And so I was like, huh, interesting. So I started doing more research, and turns out there are various ways that people believed you could become a werewolf. The first one is the wolf skin belt. The second one was this like magic salve that if you put it all over your skin, you can also become a werewolf. And I was like, huh, interesting. Um, and I was like, huh, all right, okay. Um, and so I was like, really? Like putting a werewolf stuff all over your body? That's kind of weird. Um, but then also there was like other things like, of course, Satanism, where people were like, yes, if you follow Satan, then like you will become a wolf and all this other stuff. And I was like, okay, all right. Um, but then other things included like, um, what was it again? It was like if you were a werewolf, um, you would you were like abused as a child, and this was like people who were then like releasing their like their feelings of being a werewolf, or like their inner feelings were coming out, and that's like what caused people to become werewolves. um and then also there was like divine punishment, whereas like if the gods or god chose to punish you for your actions, he would turn you into a wolf. And I was like, that kind of sucks. Like, what if you're like just like like it's not even you, like you didn't even do that. Because I feel like in ancient Greek times, like a lot of gods would do that. They would punish people, um, but a lot of the punishments were like unfair, and a lot of the punishments were kind of like, oh, like damn, like they really deserve that. Like I don't know, I don't know. Anyways, so that's kind of like where a lot of the stories come from. And it wasn't really until Hollywood era that we started to see that, like the curse of the werewolf, that like people were actually cursed, and then that's why they became a werewolf. That's where we start to see that kind of lore, where it's like, yeah, no, like if you're bitten by a werewolf, then you're cursed to become a werewolf during the full moon. And we get that during 1941 Wolfman, um, which originally was not the original Wolf movie that Universal Pictures actually gave out. There was one before. I believe it was called a werewolf in. It's not a werewolf in London. Werewolf in Paris, something like that. We'll have to look that up later. But essentially, that werewolf movie did not do as well uh, at the box office. So they kind of were like, oh well, we're win some, you lose some. And so for Wolfman, when it came out in 1941, it established a lot of the lore that we kind of see today, where it's like, if you're bitten by the wolf, then you will become a wolf when the moon is bright and the moon is full, and that's where we get the whole full moon aspect of the werewolf, and that, like, you get bitten, and then you become the wolf, and then once you're a wolf, then you change every full moon, and then the whole pentagram stuff, and that's where we get like that, like it's like this whole stuff comes from like the Romani people, which Romani is the actual term of um, gypsies. So the G word is actually a very derogatory term. I only used it for that one instance to know, for you all to know what it is. But the Romani people, if you don't know, that is the actual name of the people, or you can also call them travelers. But yeah, so that's where we get this whole idea that, like, that's where it stems from. The like, it stems from the Romani people. It's kind of like their lore, and then we get the Wolfman. And from then on, we kind of had different iterations of what it means to be a werewolf. And we've had plenty of werewolf movies, from like Underworld to Werewolves to Ginger Snap, Cursed, which, oh, Cursed. We love Cursed. Um, and so, yeah, so we get a lot of these different iterations of werewolves. Now, it's only until recently that we started to get different, like, iterations of how they become werewolves. So, like, a lot of, like, things like Cursed and Ginger Snap, like, right, like, they follow the trope of being bitten and then becoming a werewolf during the full moon. But then we get movies like Werewolves that recently came out in 2024 that actually talk, or like change up the lore a bit, and say like, oh, like now that it's a genetic thing that like people will turn into wolves during a super moon, and then you're like, oh wow, like that's interesting. It's an interesting take, right? It's an interesting take of like, huh, like that's something that I never would have thought, that like being a werewolf is something that's in your DNA already, and it's just something that is um activated during a super moon, right? Because it's not like every full moon in the film Werewolves. It's a like specific super moon that the the werewolf gene is activated, which I thought was interesting. The movie itself was interesting, but just I mean I watch I watch it and see for yourself. Um, but I think that it definitely adds to the lore, and it adds something new and fresh. Um, which can also be said for Lee Winnell's Wolfman that recently came out in 2025, this month. It introduced this concept that the curse of the werewolf is actually a animal born disease that is getting, that if you're in like the woods and you get bitten by an animal, it's kind of like this rabies type of infection, that um, then changes your like your characteristics, the way you see things, the way you perceive things. So I thought that that was interesting, that they took that route, and that they took that like aspect of things, which honestly that kind of tracks with a lot of what Brian Assman, the novel that we're talking about, the way that he kind of introduces the lore for his novel, um, in the acknowledgments at the end of the book, he actually talks about how he was inspired to create a werewolf story, like just like kind of change things up, because he had seen how in Captain America comic book, um, he had turned into a werewolf. And he was like, "What the heck?" He's like, "So you really can't do anything with werewolves? Like, it's not like a becoming a werewolf isn't like, there's not like one way to become a werewolf." Um, And so that's what kind of inspired him to create his own version, which in his version, spoilers if you haven't read the book, which you should totally read the book because that's the whole point of this channel. But in his version, it's kind of similar to werewolves, where it's in their DNA, and they don't turn during a full moon. It's during various seasons throughout the year that so happen to be around full moons, but it's not necessarily that they change during the full moon, which I thought was really interesting. That werewolf lore can change, and yeah, like who says that the lore has to be exactly what it has been? And I like that these people are taking liberties of like changing things up of like what we know to be like the werewolf lore, vampire lore, because yeah, it shouldn't just be one set thing or one set way, right? Because that's what the whole point of lore is trying to figure out how it happens. um so I thought that was very interesting, and I appreciate the way that they do that. So um that's it for the history and lore behind werewolves. So next up, what we're going to do is we're actually going to talk about Brian Assman's book. But before we do that, make sure to comment down below what you found interesting about werewolf lore, and then we will come right back. All right? All right, so now we're going to dive into the actual book, Good Dogs by Brian Assman. And let me tell you, I 100% love this book. I could not put it down. I definitely fell in love with the book. Like right off the bat, I read it in a single day. And I think that definitely, if you have not read it, definitely read it. I think it is such like a fresh take on werewolves, and it's just like it's so much fun. And the number one thing that I really love about the book is that it has short chapters. Now you might be thinking like, "Oh my god, like you're one of those people that doesn't like long chapters." Yes, cuz I have undiagnosed ADHD and I can't pay attention for long periods of time. At least that's what I think. I need to go but we'll talk about that later. But I honestly, I love the short chapters. Because honestly, for me, short chapters means that I can get through it faster and it keeps my attention, right? A lot of the times when a book has like really long chapters, I'm like, I tend to lose focus. I tend to lose a lot of the like momentum, and I have to like put it down, and then I have to take breaks. Whereas like if a book doesn't have as many pages in a chapter, then I'm more willing to be like, all right, cool. Like I'm gonna push through it because I only have like what? I only have like 3 pages left. Cool. And I'm more willing to push through it. Whereas a book that has really long chapters, I'm like, oh my god. So right off the bat, that's definitely like a plus one for me. Um, Another thing is I love his form of storytelling because it keeps you on the edge of your seat. So the way that um, the book kind of goes is it starts off from the perspective of one of the characters, and then it kind of you go through the different perspectives of the different characters. Um, and I love it. And I don't know why I'm blanking on the characters' names right now. I should know them. The only one that I can think of is Naughton, which um, that's another thing about the book is that it's a book about werewolves, right? So there's definitely a lot of Easter eggs when it comes to like other werewolves. So Naughton is one of the characters. And of course, his name derives from an American Werewolf in London, who that is the last name of the guy who is bitten and the main character in that movie. So that is, you know, a little nod to previous werewolves in the werewolf history. Um, so I appreciate that, and I love that. So the way that the book starts out is it takes place. Well, the first part takes place in San Diego, and so there is this group of werewolves who find each other through various means, and they kind of like they sniff each other out and they find each other. So it's also this kind of story of like found family, um, and like chosen family, which I thought as a queer person, like I was like, oh, that's like really nice. It's just like this other idea of you know a family that we don't get to really see as with like werewolves, and we don't really get to see werewolves being humanized as much in media, um, which I thought was really cool about this book is that like we have this like found this chosen family aspect to this book. Um, so they all live under this one house from this older werewolf. Again, I apologize. I do not know the names of the characters. I'm drawing blanks. I apologize. Um, I'll edit the characters' names in the edits after this. But can you tell I'm nervous? It's okay. So yeah, so they live with this older gentleman who has, he's been around and he knows everything. He's a werewolf himself, so he's wanted to keep, give a safe space to younger werewolves to be able to, not um, get arrested or not, die out in the world. So he creates this house for them. Um, and so they all live together, and during the transition phase where they have to, where they turn into wolves, he actually creates these collars for them that um, prevent them from going outside of the perimeter of the valley where they hunt. Um, which I thought was interesting because I was like, dang, that's smart. Like using shock collars, uh, but that are werewolf, like that are werewolf proof, um, to wrangle in werewolves and to make sure that you're not going outside of the valley because again then outside of the valley you have people and you don't want to eat people and disclose that you are werewolves to society. um and I just thought that that was very interesting. I thought that was very cool, that concept of using shock collars. um but then of course there's you run into some issues, right? Because not everything is perfect. Um, so one of the days that they're transitioning, they go through their little routine. They check the batteries on their collars. They check to make sure that everything's good before they go off on their hunt. Um, and everything seems good. But then when they wake up the next morning, there's a whole leg, a human leg, in their backyard. And so, of course, they start freaking out, being like, oh my gosh, like, what are we going to do? Like, there's a whole leg here. How are we going to do this? How are we going to handle this? Like, how are we going to survive? This is going to be terrible. Like, this is, and then they start, like, trying to blame each other, and then they're like, ah. But then, of course, the older gentleman, he's like, nah, like I got y'all. Um, I've actually been, um, investing in this place for us called Talbot. Now, if you know, that is also an Easter egg to the original Wolfman, whose last name is Talbot, Lawrence Talbot. Um, and he's like, yeah, so it's like this abandoned ghost town, and like no one's lived there for years, and I bought it so that way we can have freedom to run and we can set up the electric fences there, which I was waiting to reveal this, but like I think now's the time for us to go. And I should kind of pause here to kind of go back. So actually, the book starts with these interludes. And so you start off in like the 1800s, and it's like this lady that gets attacked by these creatures that are wolf-like, and they take her children. One pack takes the son one way, the other pack takes the daughter the other way, and then it ends on a cliffhanger. So that's another thing that I love about Brian Essman is that he leaves certain chapters on these cliffhangers that leave you like, oh my goodness, I need to like read on to finish to see what happens. And it's so good. It's so good. The way that he just knows, like, okay, I need to leave this on a cliffhanger because I know that they're gonna be like, that they're gonna want to read more here. Um, and so I thought that's really interesting the way that he does that in his book, because it leaves you on a cliffhanger. All right, back to the story. So, so they're like, all right, cool. We're gonna pack up and we're going to, figure out how we're gonna do this. So the lead woman, who his name is escaping me right now, and I can't believe that her name is escaping me right now because I loved her character. So she is tasked on trying to figure out how to get the three other younger wolves to Talbot. Um, and so she has to do that all on her own because Naughton and the older wolf, they're going to go and they're going to try and figure out how to hide the body of the leg that they found, because they find out that um, the leg belongs to animal control. And yeah, so they also find out that the battery who the collar who's the person whose collar didn't work. It was the youngest wolf, who she's kind of like, she's like a girly girl. She's like, oh yeah, I'm like, princess. Um, and they call her baby girl. And so she's like freaking out because when she's not a wolf, she's vegan. And so she's like, oh my god, I've tasted human flesh. Oh, this is disgusting. Which I thought was kind of funny to have a vegan werewolf. But you're just like thinking, you're like, how does that even like. It's just funny. It makes for a funny, like, character because she's like, I'm vegan, but like also like I'm a werewolf and I can't help eating meat when I'm a wolf. Because they obviously like the big thing there with them too is that they don't remember anything from when they were wolves. Um, they just remember feelings. So their night is lost to them. Um, so yeah, so the four of them, so the four other wolves go off to start moving to Talbot. They take their stuff. They leave San Diego. They go on a road trip to Talbot. Um, while Naughton and the older wolf are going to figure out how to conceal the body of the the animal rescue guy. And during this time, while they're going up, the group of four are going up to Talbot, they are just annoying the shit out of each other. Because the older, the like the lead, I'll call it like the matriarch kind of, because she's kind of like the matriarch of the group. Um, because you have the matriarch who she's kind of taking the lead. Then you have one of the wolves who's kind of like this like gamer surfer dude, kind of like that laid back feel, who's always hungry and always wants food. And then there's the other one who she's kind of like this like punk rock type of person. It's like I don't give a f attitude. And then you have baby girl who's like this like, oh my god, it's just a baby. Um, and so just imagine all those personalities in one truck. Um, And so she's dealing with all of that, and as they're going up to Talbot, they face like different things. Like she's like, dude, like I'm just trying to get them out into the wilderness and trying to get them out before the sun goes down, because when the sun goes down, then that's when we transform. And so she's just trying to like hurry up and get to Talbot, and they're all like, "But I'm hungry. But I want this. But I want that. But I want this." And she's like, "Jesus Christ." So I feel her pain, honestly. Like if I were having to take all these younger like wolves who like aren't really mature, and I had to like take them up to like this place, that I've never been to. It's a ghost town. Um, and all those different things. So while the story's happening, as I told you before, there's these interludes that then happen, right? And during these interludes, we start to get a little bit more information about Talbot, which we start to get when the punk rock werewolf, she starts to talk to the matriarch, kind of telling her like, "Hey, like, have you ever read up on Talbot? Like, it kind of has a weird history, like, where like people go missing." And she's like, "What? Like, that's it. That's interesting. Like, why would we get sent there then? Like, um, that's kind of weird that like, he would pick such a place to like invest in if like people go missing." And so we start to get interludes from like different decades, and it's very interesting. We start to like, there's like these people that like, I think the first one is like in the 80s, where these kids go and they're trying to like, they're trying to like uh, just go out and drink in a private place, and they think that this place is like a pretty cool spot to be in, and then all of a sudden they meet this creature who then starts killing them off one by one. And what's interesting is that you don't know what this creature is, and you're just like, throughout the whole book you're like, what is this? Like, what are they encountering? Because it's just like, it's like, oh, this creature with fur, and it's animal like, and it's all these other things, and you're like, is it a werewolf? Because you're like, okay, like this book is about werewolves. Like, is this another werewolf that like has claimed Talbot as like its territory? Like, I don't know. And so that's where I applaud Brian Asman a lot too. Is that he just keeps the suspense going. He keeps it to where you're wanting to read the book further and further, because you want to find out all this information. You're like, what the heck is this thing that is haunting Talbot, right? And then you're also worried because then the characters that you're starting to love are going to this town, and you're like, what the heck? Like, are they going to survive? They're werewolves, so like they should be able to have like an advantage, right? And then the whole time you're like, well, girl, I don't know. I don't know. And so as we go along, we just kind of um, they get to Talbot, and they start to set up camp, and then it's time for them to like transition. But then we then start to get some perspective from the creature, and we start to get this. We start to get some dialogue and some like perspective from what the creature is seeing, and the creature's like, like, my sleep has been disturbed again. Like, who are these people that are trying to come into my area? Um, what's happening? And so, but then the creature's like, wait, these people are different. They're turning into wolves. And then the creature's like, interesting. And then again, the Brian Asman doesn't call the creature. He calls it the Watcher. He says like, the Watcher was doing this. And the whole time you're like, well, what's the Watcher? Like, what is it? And then I just say right before they get to Talbot, they meet this like old man who because they had transitioned before they got to Talbot, so they had to like pull up on the side of the road and stuff. So they do that. And then so the next morning they get to Talbot. I mean, they get to the car, and then they're like, oh shoot, like, we have to figure things out. And so then they're like, um, they meet this guy, and he's like, hey, like, where are y'all going? And they're like, oh, well, we're going to Talbot. And then he's like, are you sure you want to go there? Like, that's not really the place that you want to go. It's not the safest place. And so he's trying to persuade them not to go. But of course they're like, no, no, we have to go. Like, we just bought it. We just bought the property. We're gonna live there, and that's. And then of course the guy's like, he knows. He definitely knows what's going on. Hey y'all, I just had to step off of camera to finish my eyes because I was realizing it was taking a little bit longer to do my eyes than it typically does. Well, I mean, I should be honest, it was taking the amount of time that it actually does. But so I just decided to do a lot of it off camera, but now we're back. So, and also I decided to go back and look at the names of all the characters because I realized I had forgotten all their names. So Delia is the matriarch. Joey is the kind of younger brother, the one that's kind of like aloof and kind of the surfer video gamer. Lene is the punk rocker girl, and then baby girl is the pop princess. And Hirsch is the older werewolf who is the one that's looking after all of them. And Naughton is like the second in command, who is also the boyfriend of Delia, who's the matriarch. So I'm going to continue with my makeup as we continue to go on into this. So next up, I'm actually going to go in with some of my bronzer to kind of give my face a little bit of uplift, and then I'm going to go in with some contour. Should I actually do contour first? I think I actually might do the contour first because the contour is cream. So to kind of go back to the story, so they make it to Talbot, right? And they're kind of noticing these things that in the interludes we see them happening, and we're like, oh yeah, like we remember that from the interlude, like oh shoot, like stuff, like it's about to get real with these werewolves, like, and so they turn for the first time in Talbot, and they set up their electronic perimeters. And the next morning, Delia wakes up and she's not really feeling all that well. Like, she's kind of like, what the heck? Like, I feel weird. Like, I feel like something has, like, hit me. Like, this is kind of like, I don't feel right. And so, she doesn't say anything to the other people because she's like, yeah, like, I don't want to cause a panic. I don't want to cause anything that may, that may frighten the other people here in our community. So she doesn't say anything. Which honestly, I would have said something like, I would have been like, girl, y'all, I do not feel right about this place. Because that thing that they experience is the creature that we still don't know what the creature is. We still don't know what its purpose is in the book. We just know that the creature is lurking in the shadows. So we're still kind of like trying to figure that out. But we have a feeling that the creature may be attacking them in the night, because that's why they kind of wake up feeling terrified. And later on in the book we actually figure out, like, yeah, the creature has been hunting our friends when they change at night, and that's why they become all like, they wake up all scared and they're like, oh my god. And then so the creature starts to kind of calculate and plan, like, like, when am I gonna strike? When am I gonna like make my big move? And then it starts to think like, okay, I need to like start doing things now, because like this is all fun and games, but like these werewolves, like, yeah, I kill them every night, but then they regenerate. And that was also another interesting thing that I was like, huh, interesting, like they regenerate. um, and so I was like, cool. Um, it was cool to see that they regenerate and that they like have that aspect to them as werewolves. Which I feel like a lot of werewolves do regenerate as well. Um, so that was very interesting. And so the story goes on, and then baby girl, she goes off and uses the restroom, and that's when this creature attacks her. And so baby girl runs away, and she's like, "Oh my god!" And she goes back into camp, and then like sees that you know everyone in camp sees that she's bleeding, and they're like, "Oh my god! Like what the heck? Like this is terrible." And so baby girl, they patch her up, they put her down, and something I didn't mention before, but baby girl has a boyfriend. Um, and she's in her 20s, she's living her best life, like girl, like go you, but baby girl decides to tell her boyfriend like, hey, yeah, my family and I were leaving San Diego, and we're gonna go and to this place, and you can come up and meet us on Thursday. And like, baby girl, you know, she makes mistakes, and that's okay because we've all been there. We've all been there. But it's like, girl, like you just put everyone in danger, girl. So this boy, he is a regular boy. He's not a werewolf. Um, he goes and decides that he's going to try and visit her earlier because he's getting a bad feeling. He's like, something doesn't feel right. Like it doesn't feel like she's being genuine. I feel like she's being kidnapped. And I'm like, like number one, like okay, cool. Like that's. I mean, I love that. I love that for him that he is like this chivalrous person, right? But then like you know what's going to happen, and it ends up happening. He gets close to Talbot because, of course, baby girl then shares her location with him. What to do with you? What to do with you, baby girl? And so location is shared. He goes, and of course he meets the beast. Um, this beast that is terrorizing everyone. Um, and then he dies. And so yeah, and so poor guy. And I was like, damn, he didn't have a chance. He didn't have a chance. And he actually dies by like the old man's house that I mentioned earlier, the one that was like, yeah, like don't go up to Talbot. Like there's so he's now dead. And so you know she already thinks that it was her fault that they had to move from San Diego to Talbot. So now she's like, oh my god, like I'm just gonna cause more trouble, um, for my everyone here, and so and then so she's has that on her conscience. But then she goes into the woods to use the restroom, and then she actually gets attacked by the creature. And so this is the first instance where, in broad daylight, we see the creature attack the group. And so she runs back to the camp. She's all bloodied up, and the people are like, "What the heck?" And this is after a day where, a night where they've transformed, but then they wake up feeling weird. Um, and so they're like, "This is interesting." And so they're just like different things that happen, and they're like, "What the heck is going on?" Um, and they put baby girl to sleep, and they're like, oh my gosh. And then so Delia, they patch her up, and Delia goes to take the truck to go get some signal to see where Naughton and Hirsch are, because they said that they would be up there soon. And so she goes and she tries to get like signal to call them. um And then when she goes, she actually sees baby girl's boyfriend's car. Doesn't know whose car it is, but she's like, "That's weird. That's like an abandoned car. That's doesn't think anything of it." And then um, she goes back, and at this time, Joey's kind of having these like feelings of wanting to be with Delia. Um, you know, Naughton is not there, so he's kind of like, "Ooh, maybe this is my time to like get with Delia." And she's not having it. She's like, "No, dude." Like, and so he's kind of miffed about that. And then he like goes into the woods, and then like um sees that he's all angry because he got like rejected. But then the creature takes this as the moment to attack him, and the creature fully like kills Joey. So Joey's the first werewolf to actually die. But since he dies in human form, he can't regenerate, and that's what the creature was noticing when it was killing them when they were wolves, is that they would regenerate. Um, and so now Joey's gone. And then baby girl, she goes back into the woods, um, because she wants to see back where she was when she was attacked. And then she sees Joey's body, and she's like, "Oh my god!" And then like stuff happens, and she goes back to the camp. Then they find baby girl, and they think that Joey had like attacked her because then Lene and Delia were talking about how Joey was coming on to Delia, and they're like, "Damn, like he's a sicko." And then they're like, "What the hell?" Sorry, I'm just trying to figure out what I'm gonna do next year. Um, and so of course they are like panicking, and then all of a sudden they see this head like be rolled into their camp, and it's a Joey's head, and they're like, "Oh my god, Joey is dead," which is what baby girl was trying to tell them, but she was kind of like so in shock that they didn't want to, that she couldn't say it, and they were like, "Oh my god." So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually going to finish the rest of this look off camera, come back, finish the story, and then I'll give you some tips on how to survive this book. Alright, so this is the finished look. Here we are with our werewolf makeup. So let's start off and just wrap things up, alright? So now that they've seen that Joey's dead and he's not the one that's going to be attacking them, the monster, the creature, then appears to the rest of the cast. Lene, Delia, baby girl, and it is this half bear, half woman thing. And they're like, "What the heck is this?" And so, of course, it's during the day, so they're not able to change into their werewolf form. And so they're trying to fight off this creature that for the whole time we may have suspected, like, hey, maybe it's another werewolf, maybe it's like this like ghost thing, but it's this weird bear human thing. And so that's where we start to get the backstory of what the creature's name is Mama Bear. And so we get another interlude. We get to see that this is actually the same woman who we saw in the very first like prelude. Um, and so it turns out she went to go and try and get her daughter back. Um, but then only found the corpse of a bear. And so what she did, because it was cold, she put herself inside the bear skin because it was hollow on the inside. And then she dies, but then nature then fuses her with the bear skin. She becomes this creature that then haunts this land forever and causes just everything to just go completely, you know, ghost towny and stuff. Um, so I'm not going to go into what happens in the end because I really feel that you should read the book, and I don't want this to be a huge big spoiler, which I mean that was a huge spoiler. So but then I don't want to ruin the ending because I actually really like the ending and how it ends. Even though part of it breaks my heart, I think that ultimately it is a really good book, and I honestly give it 4 to 5 stars. There were some places where I did feel like, and I don't know if this is because of my ADHD brain or because of the writing. There were some parts where I got kind of confused, so I had to kind of go back and reread. But other than that, I think that the pace of the book is really good. I think that the whole story is really good and I loved it. I wish I could have gotten a little bit more of the characters fleshed out a bit because we really only got to know the characters more so towards the end. Um, but yeah, ultimately, I highly recommend this book. Definitely pick it up at your nearest bookstore. It is sold wherever books are sold. And now we're going to go on to our next segment, which is where I give you tips on how to survive this book. All right, so now that we have gone through the review of the book, now we are going to give you a few tips on how to survive this book. Now, number one, if you're a human, you're already out. Because odds are you're not going to be able to face Mama Bear as a human. Unless you know how to hunt and you know how to um, fight off a bear thingy. Which I think reading the book, if you know how to fight a bear, how to fight a just any animal in the wild, fire is a big thing that they're afraid of. So I would have had some sort of fire tool, some sort of thing at my disposal to have ward off any animals, or especially that animal, because we do learn that later on. Spoiler alert. Um, Mama Bear is not the fondest of fire. So that's another thing. Another thing that would be helpful for this book is being a werewolf. Yeah, definitely being a werewolf would help a lot with this book. Um, and ultimately, don't go out to spooky ghost towns at night and, trust in the folklore of your town. Like, if the townspeople say that something is haunted and people die there, odds are you shouldn't probably go. So that is it for this installment of our series From Makeup to Mayhem. Hopefully you enjoyed this first video. If you do, make sure to leave a like and then subscribe and put notifications on so that way you don't miss our next video. Comment down below which books you think I should review next. But speaking of reviewing next, I already have my book for February, and we're going to be going from werewolves to vampires. We're going to be reviewing Isabel Cañas's Vampires of El Norte. So you can already get a step ahead of the game and be able to read that book. Definitely recommend getting it because we are going to have a lot of fun with it. So until then, stay spooky.